Hi, welcome to the LaRouche Pack Weekly Report. Today is June 30th, 2010. I'm John Hofel. With me is Jeff Steinberg and Lyndon LaRouche. How are you today, Lynn?
Well, I'm in fair shape considering what shape the world's in. I've been forecasting for a long time, and always, sometimes to my sorrow, successfully. And we've come to a time where on occasion like this, I should say that in my fair estimate, unless there are very significant changes, such as could have been made possibly by the German proposal made yesterday for reform, but unless a change of that character and quality at a minimum is made, we are headed in about 2 weeks to go over the cliff globally. That's the general situation. The collapse will come first, actually, in Europe. It will then trigger a collapse in the United States, which is already in process, of course, but I'm talking about a real collapse. The collapse of the Atlantic region, which will start with the North Atlantic region and spread very quickly into the South Atlantic, will then hit the Pacific Basin. Now, China is in particular a fairly good economy. The problem is, as we discussed this past week, is that China's development program, while intrinsically sound, if we assume the rest of the world were moving properly, is vulnerable to the fact that its development has not reached the point that it could withstand the effect of the transatlantic economy. Russia has a great potential as an economy. It is an inherent physical potential and also an historical potential. But the present Russian system is dominated by British offshore interests operating out of the Caribbean. And that is deadly. So Russia would have to go through a reform. But if the reform was started, I'm sure Russia would join in on the general reform. India is more stable because it does not have the particular liabilities that China suffers, though it has a kindred Asian orientation to build up. Both the former Soviet Union, China and India, and other countries are based largely on nuclear power. The development of nuclear power is a positive factor. It means that these countries which are committed to nuclear development are much ahead in principle, on potential, to those of the transatlantic region, which are talking about silly things like cap and trade, which is clinically insane, and things like that. So the problem we have, the problem in forecasting, is that we have a president who is, in every functional sense, clinically insane. He's also dominant, and as long as he's in there, the present situation is the Congress will do nothing. Government will do nothing net. That we have probably 80% of the population of the United States, the citizens, wish to have these changes. They're ready to make these changes. They hate the presidency. They hate the Congress. But the presidency and Congress are still dominating with the close collaboration with the British Empire. And it is the British Empire that's dominating the world right presently. So therefore, I would say, if all these factors which are now in place continue through the month of July, you must expect that by approximately the second week, July on, somewhere from that point on, you will have reached a point of general chain reaction breakdown of the transatlantic system, which will be followed by a collapse, if it continued, of the world system. So we're at the point where our policies are, from that standpoint, clinically insane. And I see no correlation of forces yet in power to reverse that. The one exception of interest was, and this is peculiar to Germany, that the German Bundestag mooted a policy change, which was published yesterday, which, if realized, would force a change. I mean, the very fact that Germany realizes that it cannot bail out the entire transatlantic region, because what you're looking at as the breakout point, you're looking at the Jacobo Rotschild's creation, the Inter-Alfa group. Now, the Inter-Alfa group actually controls about 75% of the world's banking, as you know, and related finance. And therefore, that's the thing we've got to break. And the Spanish banks are principally an offshoot of the British system, which operates through the Spanish banks, as you know, and into places like Brazil and elsewhere. So about 75% of the world is controlled presently by things like AIG, which is part of this system. AIG could blow at any time. A blowout of AIG again, after being bailed out repeatedly so far, its very existence is a bailout. But the bailout of that would mean a trigger which could set the whole thing off. So we're sitting on a minefield, and the minefield has some detonators in it, but they're connected to very large charges. You could actually have a situation like Germany 1923, November 1923, could begin to emerge rapidly over the summer of this year. So even though the American people, the voters, are purport in about 80% to throw most of the people out of the Congress, and at least most of the 1/3 of them out of the Senate, and throw the president out too. Even though that's the case, we do not have, apart from this good sign in Germany, which is not secure yet, but it's a good sign. It is a form of German Glass-Steagall. You have Glass-Steagall motives in Italy, northern Italy in particular. You have Glass-Steagall type motives elsewhere. So we have the potential in terms of the population, about 80% of the population wants the kinds of reforms which will actually lead to a Roosevelt type of recovery for not only the United States, but the world. But at present, I would say, if you're looking 2 weeks ahead and talking about bright prospects, you're an idiot. We are in the worst threatening situation, so that we cannot wait more than 2 weeks to make reform. We might get further than that, but I wouldn't like to do it up to my birthday time. My birthday is September 8th. By that time, I'd like to have a real economy still surviving, and that right now is in question. And as long as Obama remains in there, as long as the Democratic Party in particular, because they're the majority party, as long as they continue to support Obama, this country is headed toward hell. And we're right on the edge now. You have to think of this recent thing by Obama, or done by the Obama White House. What they did, we have about 2 million people who have run out, essentially, of unemployment compensation. What they did on the eve of this negotiation in the Congress is cut that off. Now, so between now and the middle of July, you're going to have 2 million people who are out of any protection. You have similar kinds of conditions, schools systems closing down, healthcare systems closing down, all kinds of public services just being closed down. The country is now disintegrating under Obama. And naturally, the people of the country hate it. But you've got these dumb suckers who are still supporting Obama. No patriot can support Obama. This guy is elementally impeachable. And you've got to get him out. And you can't shoot him because that's what the British would like. They'd like to make a martyr of him. So if somebody shoots him, that's the worst thing that can happen. You want him to go out in disgrace, not in a casket. And that's the way it has to be. But you would think the members of the Congress would be man and woman enough and patriotic enough to recognize these facts which are abundant all over the place. And you say, where do we get this bunch of stinking cowards we elected?
The timetable seems to suggest that the vast majority of them are going to be gainfully unemployed looking for jobs after November, but you're talking about a process that's going to play out on an even more rapid timetable than that.
You've got to look at it from the standpoint of the poor guy and his family who are unemployed without unemployment compensation, and you start to count the clock countdown, week by week by week. Then you take the spread of this effect and similar effects in other categories, apart from unemployment. The breakdown of public services, week by week by week. The disintegration of public services in the states. And this crazy thing in the Gulf where we're protecting Gulf, petroleum, right. British petroleum, which is insane. This thing is an enormous and monstrous problem. It's not a U.S. problem. It's not a Caribbean problem. It's a world problem.